Today's daf is daf Pei Dalet, and we're up to Esrei Rava. And Rava is raising an objection to Rav Nachman from another Mishnah, where we see that the Baal is considered part of Brios, and therefore if she takes a neder prohibiting herself from Brios, that neder includes her Baal as well. Esrei Rava Rav Nachman, how can you tell me that according to your opinion, which is not Rava's opinion, and the issue is whether Baal is considered part of Brios when she takes a neder, and Rava is of the opinion that certainly, as he's going to prove, that a Baal is included in the neder, he's also Brios, and you, Rav Nachman, say that Baal is not part of Brios, Baal Brios, who Vatnan, we have a Mishnah later on in the Tzadi Yomid Beis, a woman took a neder. Netua ani min haYehudim, she prohibited upon herself hashmish from all the Jews. And we assume that if Baila is part of Brios, which is the opinion of Rava, then even though she's mishubedes l'baila, she would be nesar al yidei nidra, and that's based on a principle ein machilin es ha'adam davar sha'asu. And therefore, the Mishnah establishes that netula animin haYehudim yofer chelko, he the Baal would be mefer for himself his chelik li'atzmo. And that means that his hafara is valid, so that now he can be matir hanas tashmish between the husband and the wife, between himself and his wife. But nevertheless, despite the hafara, tehei netula min Yehudim, she remains bound and enjoined vis-a-vis the rest of the world by that neder, such that after he divorces her, it would be a valid neder that would generate an Easter copy everyone else. So if somebody else wants to marry her, he's stuck with that situation of an Easter neder. And the reason why the Hafaras Habal is only meaningful as far as Chelko is concerned, but not as far as the rest of the world, is because this is a neder called Varim Shebeino Leveina. And as we've said over and over again, the difference between a neder of inui nefesh and neder b'dvarim shebeino leveina is that whereas neder on a davar sheyesh bo inui nefesh, the neder completely, the hafar seems to be completely invalidates the neder, and that means that even after gerushin, the neder is hufar, it's batel, but in the case of beino leveina, it's only a temporary and conditional hafara, only as long as they are married, but afterwards, the neder, after she is divorced, the neder is chal and remains binding vis-a-vis the rest of the world. The iyam, and here's the kasha of Rava, according to you, Rav Nachman Baal Lav B'chal Briosu, so that if you're right in your premise that a Baal is not included in Brios, and therefore that neder never generated an Isur Tashsham Mita. Now, in such a case, we're going to say that for sure, the Vadai, her kavana was not to take a neder from Anas Tashmish of all Jews, because she's an HSC, she's a married woman. And even in the absence, even without the neder, she's Asura Aleim Midin HSC. So we're going to assume that when she took a neder of Netula Animina Yehudim, she wasn't referring to, she didn't have in mind Tashmish Mita of the Hanos that she might get from other people, and she wants to generate an Isra on them, because Tashmish Mita is obviously Asur, but rather she wants to prohibit something else, another kind of Hana from the Yehudim, from the Jewish people, namely Peros, for example, Hanas Peros. Now, if when she says Netula Animene Yehudim, she has in mind that she won't benefit Hanas Peros, then Midre Imi Nefesh, once she generates an Isur that prohibits her from enjoying the perils of all the Jewish people, then it becomes Neder Inui Nefesh. And how could it be that the Mishnah says later on Daf Sadi, that in this case, we define it as a Neder Midvarim Shebeino Leveinos, such that his Hafara is only a limited Hafara that only applies as long as they're married, but it's not valid after the divorce. We have here clearly a case of Nidre Inui Nefesh. And yet the Mishnah says he can only be made for Li'atzmo because it's Varim Shebeino Leveinos. So it must be that her kavana was for Tashmish, and she included in all the Jewish people her husband as well. So you see from the Mishnah that a Baal is considered B'chlal HaBrios, and that's against Rav Nachman Eimelacha. And the Gemara suggests the following defense to answer Rava's objection on behalf of Rav Nachman, that a Baal is not B'chlal HaBrios. But this particular case, where she declares Netulas Ani Mea Yehudim, that's a different halacha. Shani halacha. Here in this particular case, the Baal is considered B'chlal HaNeder, and it's only a neder of Beino Leveino, but not Inui Nefesh. And why do we assume that in this case, when she took a neder Netulas Ani Mea Yehudim, she had in mind Hanos Tashmish, but not Hanos Peiros? And the answer is the Mucha Milsa Dalatera Ka'asra Nafshik. We have a proof from the neder itself that her intention was to prohibit upon herself something that was mutter for her. Now, as far as all the Yehudim in the world, they're asura leha b'din eishes ish, even without the neder. So she, if her intention was to create a neder, an isur, through this neder, then she must be referring to Anas Tashmish Mibailo. But as a general rule, insists Rav Nachman, if she takes a konam she'eni nenis lebrios, then the Baal is not included in the brios. In this case, if you don't include the Baal in the neder, in the Isa, then why would she take an Isa? And therefore we have a Mucha Milsa that she's being machadish and Iser in a Dovra Mutter, and that would only be her Baal. And therefore we assume that the Baal is B'chal Brios, but that's the exceptional case here. Now the Ran has a slightly different girsa, which we'll read. And when the Gemara asks this kasha on Rav Nachman from the mission of Netu Anim and Yehudim, that the Baal is made for his chelik, Baal la B'chal Brios Lamala Farah. Why does the Mishnah require hafara in order to permit the Baal to have tashmish amita with his wife? Why do you need hafara at all? According to you, Rav Nachman, when she took this neder of Netula and even Yehudim, she did not include the Baal. He's not included on the brios. And therefore, she only prohibited upon herself tashmish mi shar haYehudim from others. According to Rav Nachman, exclusion of the Baal. So if she's not asura b'tashamit to the Baal, why does he need to be made for chelko? And the more answers that in truth a Baal is not included in brios b'shayni hacha. Here the din is different. And when she generates an Easter neder of Hanas Tashmish, and she says, quote, Nitulanim and Yehudim, unquote, we must assume that she includes her Baal within that Easter neder. The Muchamilsa Da'aterika Asra Nafshe. It's crystal clear that her intention was through this neder to generate an Easter upon herself on something that until this point she would be mutter. And as far as Kol Yehudim, as we said before, then she's asura because of Eishes Ish, and therefore we must assume that her kavanah in this neder was to generate an Easter Tashmit on a Baal, and therefore he has to be made for his chelko. Now we go on to analyze a different part of the Mishnah. A woman who took a neder and she declared konam sha'ani nenes lebrios, and she took upon herself a neder in joining herself from having hano from the brios. The Torah in Parshas Emor says La'ani v'lager tazov osam, and the lashon of the Kra is aziva and not nesina, which means that there's no tovas hana in the cases of matnas aniyim. So the Bailam are not authorized to divvy up the matnas aniyim to the aniyim of their choice. All they can do is aziva, and that's what they're obligated to do. Aziva means they have to leave the leket shikupeya in the sada, open up the field for the aniyim. The aniyim will come and take leket shikupeya. And it means that the leket shikupeya is hefker aniyim, and she now can take from this hefker without having hano from anyone on the face of the earth. Certainly not from anyone, not even from the bailim of that sada, because they have the mitzvah aziva, so she's picking up the leket shikupeya from hefker and not directly from the bailim. So the Gemara now raises the following objection. Why is it that the Mishnah mentions that she can be nena from leket shikupeya? What about matnas aniyim? V'lo ketani v'maser ani. On the 3rd and 6th years of the Shemitah cycle, the Baal Asad is obligated to be mafresh 1/10 of his produce instead of Meiser Sheni, Meiser Ani. And therefore, when this woman takes a neder, and we want to suggest that she can still survive by picking up leket shikupeya, we should have mentioned also Meiser Ani. And I'll prove it to you, says the Gemara. For Tanya, we have a brisa maser ani, that she can benefit from maser ani. So we seem to have a contradiction here between the Mishnah and the brisa. Is she allowed to take maser ani or not? Or Rav Yosef Lokasha or Rav Eliezer Harabana. Rav Yosef is going to tell us that the Mishnah and the brisa represent two different shitas. It's not one kana. The brisa that adds Meiser Ani reflects the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer. The Mishnah that omits Meiser Ani reflects the Shita of Rabbana Disnan. We learned in a Mishnah in the 4th chapter of Demai. Demai is peros that you buy from an Amoretz. You don't know whether it is mafresh maser or not. And the Rabbanan established that you cannot eat maser, you cannot eat Demai until you mafresh maser. And Rabbi Eliezer Omer, even though the Chachamim were choshesh in the case of an Amoretz that he wasn't mafresh his masros, however, in those years 3 and 6 of the Shemitah cycle, where there's a mitzvah of maser oni, ein adam tzarich likros shem al maser oni shel d'mai. If a person buys tvua from an Amoretz, and we said that he has to be mafresh maser rishon 110, he does not have to be mafresh maser oni. So he's only mafresh maser rishon and what's called trumas maser from Dmai, but not, according to Rabbi Eliezer, maser oni. In other words, we're not choshesh that the Amoretz would have cut out the aniyim from their maser. We are choshesh that maybe they weren't mafresh maser rishon and giving a tenth of their produce to the Levi, but as far as giving to the ani is concerned, we're going to assume that certainly they gave their mafresh, their maser to the ani. Now the Ran introduces another concept here, and that's called tevel. When you buy Dmai, meaning tvua from an Amoretz, and you're not sure if he was mafresh masros, then the status of that tvua that you bought is tevel, and it's tevel of maser. And in order to remove the status of tevel, you have to be mafresh by, number one, being korei shem, and you say that this area, this tenth of the produce is designated for the Levi, and you have to be kovea makom. However, Rabbi Eliezer is of the opinion that in terms of Paris of Demai, he does not have to give any Masa to the Ani on those years of Maser Ani. And he doesn't even have to be Korei Shem of Maser Ani and designate 1/10 of the tour that he bought from the Amoritz as Maser Ani. And this has to do with Rabbi Eliezer's Shita about Tevel Maser Ani. Normally, Tevel Maser, like for example, Tevel Maser Rishon, if you eat it, you generate a Chiyuv Misa B'dei Shamayim. However, with regard to Maser Ani, let's say you have your own tour in a normal case, and it's the 3rd or the 6th year, and you are not mafresh Maser Ani, and then you or somebody else went ahead and ate the tour. There's no Chiyuv Misa B'dei Shamayim, and it's not like Tevel. And this is going to impact on a suffix situation. So in the case of Demai from an Amoritz, with regard to Maser Rishon, that's a suffix Iser Misa, Chiyuv Misa B'dei Shamayim, because it might be Tevel. But as far as Maser Ani is concerned, in the case of an Amoritz where we have a suffix, you don't have to be mafresh, be suffix, because even in the case of Vadai, that you have tour that you know he was not mafresh, or you were not mafresh Maser Ani, it does not have the status of Tevel as far as the Chiyuv Misa B'dei Shamayim. So in Demai, where it's a suffix, we can be making. That's the Shita here of Rabbi Eliezer. Ein olim tzarich likros shem al Maser Ani shel Demai.